Hello, I am Tatus. Welcome to the Shrinker's Bedside Companion, the microphilia vlog you never knew you wanted to ignore. I'd like to thank you for inviting me into your browser history today. This is a little bit of a surprise for some of you. I know I have made some reference to trying to get some of my stories out in audio format, which was a little bit of a white lie. At the time, I'd pretty much decided that I was going to experiment with vlogging, and well, you will hear me actually say the words that I have put on paper, but you'll also have to put up with my face unless you well, just turn your screen away or blank it or what have you. I put up a poll for the first story that I would be reading for you in what may or may not be a series of log posts. The winner of that was a little piece I did for Gentle April last year, a size riot contest run by a fine gentleman by the name of Aborigin, the title of which is She Possibly It. There's some details about the story that I will go into afterwards, but that's kind of boring stuff. I'll also go into a little bit about well, some things that are going on in my life professionally that I'd like to share with you, and highlight some members of the size community that I think need a little bit of a spotlight on them. We all need one from time to time, and well, hey, if I get a few people to look at this and spread the wealth a little bit, all the better. I do feel the need to mention the reason behind the name, Shrinker's Bedside Companion. I know some of you are probably thinking Prairie Home Companion. That was a factor. I am a little bit of an NPR junkie when I get the chance to listen to radio. Not my favorite particular program, but certainly one that has brought me some joy over the years. The real reason for using this title is as a homage to the Shrinker's Literary Companion, which was a wonderful little site maintained by Dream Tales quite a while ago. When I first started looking for size content on the internet, his site was the first one that I found that had consistently high quality material that really spoke to me. Now, I know you're here to either listen to me recite my story, or just because you'd like to see who the heck that person you've been interacting with on the internet looks like. And, well, here I am. I hope that's not too much of a disappointment. So, without much further ado, I'm going to read to you She Possibly It, a story that actually has no shrinking in it, although it does have size content. Much of my stuff is not safe for work, kinky, fetishy, sexy, dark at times, light at others. This is rated G. You could have the kids sit around, listen to it. I don't know why you would. I don't know why they'd sit there, but feel free. I will take this off to be a little more comfortable, and I need to take the glasses off as well. I'm one of those people who needs to have a naked face to read. So, without further ado, She Possibly It. Copyright me. Once upon a when he knew things. He knew he was a soldier alike in all ways to the dozens of others he had tracked and battled, met and ended, differing only in the person who issued his orders and the color of the flag she saluted when she had to. He knew it had been a pause short of 5 somethings since he laid the last enemy soldier to the ground, exactly 5 somethings since he received his last order. He never knew the name of the woman whose orders echoed in his ears. After 5 somethings, he doubted he ever would. He suspected he knew she had won. He suspected that he knew that he had been forgotten. Knowing was hard. Balancing too many no's in one head gave him migraines, made it hard to think, and after 5-somethings he'd slippery sloped his nose to a minimum, only dealing with the real in Gatling bursts of consciousness. Mostly he dreamed and avoided the real. Dreaming was better than knowing. In dreams he didn't need to know if some things were years or weeks, months or millennia. It was all time. He misunderstood as much about time as time understood him. He and time had agreed to leave each other alone over lunch. Or maybe that was a dream. In the real, he used to obsess about beginnings, others and his own. He wanted to know what he was and where he had come from. He'd been manufactured, possibly. In someone's image, maybe. To fight their wars, probably. None of that mattered in dreams, and after 5-somethings, he'd given up on playing any am I man or am I butterfly thoughts. Maybe he was the corpse of a storm giant animated by dark elven runes, writ large in Asgardian blood, or a skyscraping robot complete with atomic turbine heart. Did it matter which one he was? Probably not. Either way, the thing that gave him life and motor force was poison to the people who built or animated him. The real was different every time he left the dream. Everything is liquid when you only see in blinks. The ground has tides that are only visible when you can see the cycle of erosion and encroachment through the lens of this strange time. He watched the ebb and flow of grass and flower wither and bloom down the somethings. He watched placidly over the body of the last soldier he had ended. Sometimes he thought about the corpse drowned beside him, tried to remember what it had been like to fight her, tried to remember what she had been like. Sometimes he remembered her bones were calcified in necromancy. Other times they were nuclear steel folded over upon itself like a katana forged in a sun. He never remembered her face. The hills were very close to engulfing him as well. Blink by blink they lapped their way up his hips, past his shoulders, until only parts of his head bobbed along the surface, his eyes level with the waves like a shark looking for survivors in the Atlantic. This time when he blinked real, he was not alone. He wondered if he had grown, or maybe they'd started making people smaller than they did in the something since he'd last seen one. Not that people were ever that large, but the one standing in front of his eye was less than half the size he remembered, barely a quarter the size of his ice-glass eye. He looked at the 3 crows tattooed in a circle around his face and wondered if war fallout had led to pygmy mutations, or if the gods had cursed the people for bringing the dead into their conflict. He wanted to warn it that magic or dark radiation would harm it if it didn't leave, but he couldn't. The hill had flooded over his mouth, and he had forgotten how to speak, or had never been taught. It hadn't occurred to him that he might be a child, until he was already almost dreaming again. It was still there the next time he reeled, only bigger and possibly she. Gender was also hard. Someone told him he was male. He let them do the knowing and just took their word for it. She, possibly it, had changed as had the hill. The hill had receded. She, possibly it, had grown. Not by the same amount. She, possibly it, was only person-sized now, and the hill had drained down almost to his shoulders. His mouth was no longer covered in loam. He could feel the sun on his neck. She, possibly it, still stood in front of him, only now she, possibly it, was level with his chin. The 3 crows were covered in dirt. A shovel rested against his cheek. If he had teeth, and he wasn't entirely sure he did, it would have made an adequate toothpick. It was only his hill that had receded, not the hills that had covered his fallen enemy, or the ones that had grown up over nothing. He wondered if she, possibly it, had drained his hill. He wondered why she, possibly it, would do that. It couldn't be easy draining a hill with a toothpick when you were person-sized. He smiled his thanks at his helper. She, possibly it, scampered away from his open mouth down the hill a ways. She, possibly it, spoke things up to him he didn't understand. He'd forgotten the words, or the words had changed. But there was a kindness in her, possibly its voice, something warm beneath the fear. That was enough. Maybe if he stopped reeling for a pause, she, possibly it, wouldn't be scared anymore. And so he dreamed. "Wake up, giant!" The order rang through his ear in a voice he'd never heard before, but whatever science or sorcery motivated him recognized the authority in the stranger's words, and so he blinked real. She, possibly it, had changed, as had the hill. He was surprised to see the flood hill had subsided even further. His armored torso was exposed to the quicksilver sky. His arms and most of his hands were almost free. Only the very tips of his fingers were dipped in the ground, 10 steel sequoias with fingerprints for roots. He only waded in the dirt. She, possibly it, was standing on the hill that had drowned the face of the last enemy. She, possibly it, was almost as small as she, possibly it, had been the first time he had seen her. The 3 crows that danced in a circle around her face had been replaced by 5 dragonflies that hovered around the water that leaked from her, possibly its, eyes. "You have to wake up, please, you have to." She, possibly it, spoke the words into a ring on her, possibly its, left hand. The words were the same nonsense he'd heard before until they reached the ring and they became something he understood. Orders. "If you can hear me, do something." The order was valid if vague. He was compelled to obey, but had to take a moment to decide the how. He uprooted his fingers from the liquid earth and lifted them up to the angel sky. She, possibly it, couldn't help but see this, even with her leaking pinprick eyes. Gravity was variable on her, possibly its hill. She, possibly it, rose and fell several times before finally staying on the ground. Or possibly she was jumping. Knowing was hard. "The woman at the museum said this was a part of you. It makes you do whatever I say. Is that true?" He wondered what a museum was, and what it tasted like. He understood the rest enough to nod. "Can you talk?" He hadn't decided if he could, or remembered if he'd forgot, so he shrugged. "Grandma found you out here on the hill when she was little like me, but she didn't have this. She wanted to get you free. She wanted to get you to take her on adventures and see the world and save towns and meet strange people." He tilted his head to the left at the thought that this was a different she, possibly it. But the hill was so big, and you just slept there doing nothing, and she got too old for adventures, but she kept on digging. I tried to help, but she was so old, and Mama says I'm the runt of the litter, so I wasn't much help. But I read the books, and I found the lady in the museum, and I woke you up. So, he thought it was a question, but he didn't understand it. "Do you want to go on adventures with me? Not big, but I know things, and I got maps if you can carry me." She stumped him at want. "Can't you answer?" Shrug. "But I could order you to do all that stuff." Nod. Get out of the hill." It had been such a long time since he last moved. His joints had frozen in the cold, liquid ground. He had to flex several times before he could step out of the hill. Put your hand out and let me step on it." She, possibly it, fit easily into the palm of his hand. "Now go kill my mother. She's over there." She, possibly it, pointed to a village on the other side of the enemy grave hill. He'd barely taken a step when she, possibly it, started jumping in his palm. "Stop! No! Order! Cancel order! Don't do it!" He stopped. "Were you really going to kill Mom?" Nod. "Why would you do that?" Blink. "I know I ordered you, but you're not supposed to do bad things like that. You're only supposed to hurt people if they're trying to hurt you, and only enough to make them stop. It's called civilization." Blink. "It's cause of this, isn't it?" She, possibly it, held up the medallion. "You have to do everything I tell you, even the bad things." Nod. "Crush it." She, possibly it, held the medallion above her, possibly its head, and closed her pinprick eyes shut. It was delicate work maneuvering steel pillars between the whisper-thin gaps between the top of her, possibly its head, and where the medallion dangled. The crushing was easy. "Do you have to do what I say now?" Shrug. "Put your finger up your nose." He didn't feel the compulsion, only curiosity about this nose he apparently had. He tried to look at it, but only ended up crossing his eyes. "What are you going to do now?" Shrug. You could come with me and learn stuff and have adventures if you want, he pondered. Only we can't hurt people. I know I can't order you around anymore, but somebody's got to teach you to be good. I could do that if you'd like. You could keep me safe, and I can be your teacher. Would you like that? He hadn't been real this long in 5-somethings, but he didn't feel the need to dream. The thought worried him. He didn't know he could be worried, but he was. He worried that if he dreamed again, that she, possibly it, would not be there when he next reeled. He would miss her if she was gone. Come with me? He didn't know. Please? But maybe he would learn. He nodded. They found the giant statue gone, and Dragonfly 5's bed empty. No one who spoke any sense connected the two events, but the simple folk liked to point out the pile of loam and the rock that used to be the hill. They pointed to the one piece of ground left undisturbed, when everything else was left in ruin. They pointed to the grave at what had been the foot of the hill, and the 3 ravens circling the stone that marked it. And that's the end of the story. For those of you who are here to listen to the story, you can pretty much leave now. I'm going to be doing some boring discussion about what went into it. Mention a few things about the size community in general and some things that are going on in my professional life. But if you're just here for the story, thank you. Goodbye. Whatever blesses you, bless you. So this story is a bit off the beaten path for my standard. I have to admit I was doing it as a bit of a pastiche of another size creator, Curvy the Fly, also Curvy the Mammoth, and Curvy the bunch of other things. She is a wonderful person who I have met on Twitter, who has an absolutely lovely obsession with the Iron Giant. And I decided when I sat down to write this story that I would not only try to write a story that might please her, but also get a lot of people to think that she was the one who wrote it. So if you were fooled, I'm sorry. If you are her and you liked it, well, you're welcome. This is the 3rd time I have actually done this. The first 2 times I got a little too emotional during the reading. That's because the character of Dragonfly 5 is based partially on myself, or at least in my head. When I was writing that, I was trying to write me at age 10, and that was about the time that I first brought my grandmother to the hospital. My grandmother and grandfather raised me, and the last time I brought her to the hospital was several years later, and there's still some emotion attached to that I think works well in the story, but came out a bit in my reading. I think there's still a little bit of emotion in this one, which isn't a bad thing. I'm not saying emotion is bad, but breaking down and blubbering is not going to be conducive to telling the story. It is 2,000 words, a little under 2,000 words, which is the requirement for Size Riot. So I may have expanded a few things out or truncated some things just because of the nature of it. I can only give a snapshot on this one bit. One of the things that no one will ever know is that Dragonfly 5's mother is 4 wolves. Well, I guess you know that now. The idea being that you had the 3 ravens for the grandmother, 4 for the mother, and Dragonfly 5, the 5. And presumably if Dragonfly 5 succeeds at her adventures, which I'm the writer, so she will, and decides to have children of her own, there'll be a somebody something 6 maybe if everything works out all right. I think that's pretty much all I really need to say about the story. I hope you enjoyed it. I have put some thought into what I would like to do with the power of a vlog with up to 8 people potentially watching this. And one of the things I want to do is put a spotlight on certain people in the size community who are creative talents. The size community is great, it's vast. Unfortunately, there are pockets where people tend to clump and you don't necessarily meet people or get exposed to the work of artists who aren't in your clump. If you aren't in giantess cities, or if you don't do Tumblr much, or if you're not on Twitter or Facebook, Discord, ad nauseum. I could do probably 2 hours just talking about the number of people I've met who I deeply appreciated the work of. That will get very boring fast. So I think I'll limit myself to a couple per vlog entry. And I've already mentioned Borgen, so I'll tell you a little bit more about him. Borgen is an excellent size writer, one of the most erudite and craft-oriented writers that I know. He blows me out of the water in terms of the depth of attention that he puts to the way he crafts his words, and he is such a great world builder. He has a number of books out, Smashwords. If I figure out how technology works beyond the camera, microphone, internet that I have going for me right now, I will try to put links to his Smashword account at the bottom of this. I will also try to link the Patreon page of a young gentleman by the name of Mr. Ben Boston, who is another incredibly talented creator and artist, visual artist. He does some absolutely amazing shrunken women, giantesses. I was fortunate enough to meet both of these gentlemen at the most recent SizeCon. Very friendly, very nice. I urge you to support them as much as you are capable of doing it, buying their work, getting a commission, supporting their Patreons. Do what you have to. And now on the commercial side of things, I have some books available myself. I will try to also put links to where you can find those. Most of my stuff doesn't fit the category of what I read today, so if you have never read any of my stuff before, heard this story for the first time, you might want to wait until you hear some of the looter stuff before you just dive right into it. Or if you're really into the lewd as well as the rated G stuff, go for it. I have no problem. I think I'm going to call it right now. I apologize for the lack of technical acumen on my side and my rather amateurish approach, but trying to be friendly and open, and there's a certain amount of stagery that's going to be involved. I'm a man in a purple shirt and a yellow hat. It's going to happen, but I'm going to try to keep this a little bit spontaneous and scripted only so far as the story. I am debating about something that I don't know if anyone would be interested in, but if anyone would like the physical copy of the printout that I have read today, get in contact with me and I will mail it to you. Just the one, so it'll be the first person who gets in contact with me who is willing to divulge an address that I can actually mail this to. Nothing too fancy. As far as contest goes, it really sucks. I mean, you can get this free on my blog. It's just, you could print it up probably better than mine is, but I don't know, I'll put my card with it or something. But I think that's going to be it for now. I'm going to try one fancy bit of something and see if I can pull this off.